Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today I want to go over the 5 main mistakes new gardeners make, or people make when they're starting a vegetable garden. So first thing is the sun. People place it in the wrong place. You must have 6 hours of sun. And what most people do is they look, they see a sunny spot, they assume it's going to have at least 6 hours. If you don't have 6 hours of full sun is when the sunlight hits the leaves just like that. It has to be directly hitting your plants. Now, it could be 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, but it has to be a total of 6 hours of direct sunlight. Without 6 hours of sunlight, minimum, 8 is perfect, or a little bit more, you're not going to be able to grow a lot of vegetables, herbs, flowers, because they just don't have enough sun. They'll grow, they'll look okay, but they're just not going to produce for you. So you have to take the time. My garden, it's the morning right now, 9 o'clock. The sun starts over here and it tracks all the way around. I spent a day when I was building this garden just watching the sun at 8, 10, 12, 2, just to make sure it gets enough sun. So you need 6 hours of sun. Why did I stress that so much? Because without that, your garden's not going to thrive. The next thing that people have trouble with is not picking the right size garden. You can start with a bed like this, 4 feet by 8 feet. That's perfect. There's 2 tomato plants back there. There's lettuces right in there. There's an eggplant over there. This can be changed up. 4 feet by 8 feet. Perfect size to feed your family, get yourself some practice gardening, and build your confidence. You can start with a couple of containers. A lot of people start too large, you know. They end up with something like this before they're ready for it. Start small, build up as you gain skills. I think the third mistake people make is they spend way too much money to get their garden started, and it's disappointing. And what do I mean by that? Right now, last 10 years, 20 years, organic gardening has become sort of soup du jour. Organic gardening is great. Having to spend a lot of money buying organic products is not what organic gardening is about. And people spend a lot of money on all these fertilizers and amendments and different things, thinking they have to give the plant the stuff that these plants just don't find in nature. Organic gardening is really about sourcing the amendments for your garden locally. For example, my yard. Leaf mold, leaf mulch, compost, wood ash. Looking for inexpensive ways to bring in organic fertilizers. If you have to buy it, think of this. If you buy a 3-pound bag of an organic fertilizer, it might cost you $8 to $12. I've seen it as high as $20. You can buy a 50-pound bag of alfalfa pellets for about $15. You can use that as an organic fertilizer. Know what you're spending your money on. Don't just run around buying things that say organic and believing everything you hear from me or you see on the internet. So the mistake is people don't get compost started, or they don't look locally for manures, or they don't take the time to really think about what resources do I have that I can use in my garden to save money. So people get burned out. They spend a lot of money on these fertilizers. Sometimes they over-fertilize, sometimes they under-fertilize, sometimes they put too much in places, and the plants don't do well. Over-fertilizing is just as harmful as having plants that aren't fully fed. Now, when it comes to organic gardening, you know, you may have to buy certain products, and seeing it marked organic is okay. But just don't be fooled that to be an organic gardener, it has to be labeled by somebody telling you that it's organic. For centuries, people have been using compost. Now, I know most of us can't set up something like this for composting, but maybe you could set up a pen 4 feet by 4 feet, put in your chopped up leaves there. You're going to have great leaf mold that's going to have worm castings in it. If you can't do that, well, then maybe you can get a trash can and you can fill that full of leaves, and you can make some compost in there, some leaf compost, some leaf mold in there. I'm just saying that there's alternatives to having to spend a lot of money buying products that say organic on it. Understand what they are. Don't be fooled by fancy packaging. Tied closely with spending too much money on organic products is just not getting started with compost. Again, as I was saying, this is a really big production. You don't need that. Just maybe do 1 bin, 2 bins, just the metal bin on the end. But people don't get started composting. It's not rocket science. You can just throw it all into a bin and let it do its thing. It may not be ready in 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, but a year from now, you're gonna have great compost for your garden. So get a compost pile started somewhere, and don't let that be a barrier to getting free stuff for your garden. The fourth thing that people do wrong has to do with watering, and it's really 2 parts. You wanna make sure you place your garden in a place that when it rains hard, water doesn't sit at the root level. Now that's rare, but you just wanna make sure that when it rains, the water runs away. If you're not sure, dig a hole 12 inches deep, fill it full of water. If it doesn't drain out within an hour, then you might have a sitting water issue. So you want your soil to drain well. The other issue really is, and this is my no-dig garden, is people don't water enough. It's hard to figure out. Like, I can't just tell you water X amount of time, because watering changes based on the size of your plant and how hot it is out. I know that kind of makes sense, but people always ask me, how much do I water? Well, plants need a good 2 inches of soaking several times a week. So that means you don't just water once a week at the base of the plant, because most plants grow these surface roots that come out all over the place. So you're really watering to keep the top 6 inches moist. You're putting mulch down to keep water under there, moisture in there, so that your plants are getting a nice steady supply of moisture. So watering is a big issue. When in doubt, you could go with having to water a garden like this, or gardens, in raised beds, 2 to 3 times a week, a good soaking. Now, when it comes to containers, if you let those plants in the containers dry out just 1 time, that means the soil in the container dries out all the way through 1 time, you've greatly damaged the plant root system. They're not going to be able to pull in nutrients. They're going to not thrive. You've created a problem. So container plants might need to be watered every day at the height of summer, even if you put mulch in a container. So watering is the key. You want to make sure, one, your garden is in a place that it drains well, because your plants don't want to sit in soaking, wet, sopping soil. And 2, flip side, is if you don't water them regularly, they're just not going to thrive. And you have to water the entire bed so that you're soaking the surface down to depth for the surface roots of your vegetables and for the deeper roots of your plants. So we have number 1, sun. Number 2, starting out with a garden that's too large. Number 3, relying and spending too much money on products stamped organic rather than using compost and thinking about other ways to do it. 4, watering. And really the 5th thing that people do wrong is they spend more time reading about gardening than actually starting the garden. Now, you don't have to know everything. It's impossible. I've been doing this for decades. I still learn. I still make mistakes. So the mistake people make is they just think about starting a garden and they never get started. So start with a small plot, maybe something this size, maybe something just 4 feet by 4 feet, maybe both. Put them in a place where they get 6+ hours of sun. So another mistake people make is they grow vegetables at the wrong time. What do I mean by that? Everything that's in this tower, it's the fall. They're cool weather crops. Lettuce, spinach, arugula, chard, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, all like the cool weather. They can take a frost, radishes, the leaves can freeze a little bit, they do perfectly fine. They like the cool nights, the cool days. They thrive typically in the spring and later in the fall. That's when you plant your cool weather crops. The warm weather crops can't take a frost, they'll be damaged. They really like warm soil temperature, 60-degree soil temperature, 80-degree days. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, squash, watermelon, cantaloupe, beans, all have a specific temperature they like to grow in. So you need to match what you're growing with what the temperatures are in your area. So a lot of times people may start warm weather crops too early, or they're trying to grow lettuce in the middle of the summer, and it all takes off in bolts like this really quickly. All lettuce will bolt eventually, even in the fall it will do that, but in the summer it just goes from these little tiny leaves to this big stalk trying to flower, and the leaves are bitter. Lettuce has to be grown in the cool weather, so you do need to spend some time figuring out what are the cool weather crops, what are the warm weather crops. Just get out there and get started. Expect to make mistakes. It's okay. That's how you're going to learn. And once you get started, write down your successes, write down your failures, and then each year you get to learn. Hope this gives you some ideas of how to be successful in your first garden. Don't be afraid to get started, and don't spend a ton of money on products that sit on a shelf.